And hello. Welcome to this episode of CounterCurrents. I'm Larry Johnson, and today I'll be talking with my friend Pepe Escobar, recently returned from Yemen, and we'll look at the prospects for Yemen's future as the sole nation that's standing on behalf of the Palestinian people, and whether or not it's being used as a springboard for a war with Iran. If you like what you're seeing, please hit the like button, subscribe, and stay tuned. All right. So you got back from your trip yesterday. I know you're 12 hours ahead of me.
Yes, I'm 11 hours ahead of you. I'm dead, Larry. I spent the whole day writing 2 columns today.
Oh, man.
It was the first time that I actually managed to sit down in over a week. And it was great, of course, because all the memories, of course, are here. You know, that it's very, very strong. Look, 40 years as a foreign correspondent, everywhere on the planet, you think that you have seen it all. But when you meet the Yemenis, oh, man, it's another planet on everything. You know, their purity, their strength of character, moral clarity, their beauty, inner beauty and outer beauty. You know, in one of the columns, I basically said that they look as pure and beautiful sartorially as spiritual. They look great. They look fantastic. And at the same time, they're very, very pure. They're always with a smile. And we were worried. We'll tell them all the time, do you know that the empire is coming after you with everything they got? They're like that, you know, like, okay, we're ready.
Well, yeah,
it's amazing. It's amazing. It's amazing. It's undescribable, Larry. Really, you have to feel it.
That's what's tough to get your mind around. It's you look at them on the surface; they don't appear to be one of the most modern society on the planet.
No, they are a conservative society. Do you know that Prophet Muhammad himself, he makes several references directly to Yemen and Yemenis. So we're talking about the purity of Islam in the 7th century. Mm-hmm. And, you know, it was in Saudi Arabia, what Roman Empire called Arabia Felix. Not by accident. The Romans, they got a little bit of the picture. You know, this is a happy land, a pure land, and it should be respected. And at the same time, do you know that most of the Islamic armies in the 7th century, guess where they came from?
Yeah.
Arabia.
Yeah.
Do you know who took Islam to Africa, India, Southeast Asia? Yemenis, everywhere. So, you know, don't mess with them. Well, it's an enormous mistake to mess with them, you know.
Did you notice any of the tensions between the Sunnis and the Shia in Yemen?
No, you don't see. Look, I was very lucky, Larry, and the first time I lobbied heavily. I think this was probably the first time in my life that I went to a souk at 9 with an armed escort.
Yeah, I saw it. Yeah. I watched the film.
Exactly, but it was great because I told them, please let me walk around, let me talk to people, and they were very polite, but they were around me all the time. But I could stop everywhere, talk to the guys mending sandals in the streets, with the laundryman, everywhere, the bikers, the traffic controllers, and all. It's absolutely outside. And you know, with a few words of English, you feel this. Inner strength, this aristocratic swinging allure at the same time. Mm-hmm. It's absolutely fascinating. You can see right away that you are in front of some extremely sophisticated people. And at the same time, you know, their human qualities show off. You identify it right away. It's a very powerful experience. You know, I haven't experienced that in other parts of the Arab world. I did in Afghanistan in a completely different surrounding with Pashtuns and Tajiks, and in Iran, especially in Mashhad in eastern Iran. Yeah. But in the Arab world, when you see that, it obviously is not what you see in those piece of shit bling bling entities like Saudi and the Emiratis or even Qatar, you know, where everything is fake.
Yeah.
And the people are fake as well. You've been there, Larry. You know, you've seen them. So,
did you hear any explosions? Did you?
of course, we did on. Remember when they bombed Sana? Okay, maybe our audience or you read about it that they're bombing Sana every day.
Yeah, every day.
But the first bombing early last week was on Monday, and we heard in the distance because it was around 2.5 kilometers from our hotel. And obviously, I saw the sirens right away. And obviously, of course, your immediate conclusion, oh yeah, they're bombing the city. But they are, impeccable. So can you imagine that I received a message today, Larry? One of my now very good friends who said, we are celebrating aid under the bombs.
Mm-hmm.
As a matter of fact, yesterday night, they bombed Sana 13 times. And as you know about intelligence, Larry, their ground intelligence in Sana and Saada is less than zero.
Yeah, it's probably non-existent.
No bloody clue what they're bombing. So what I managed to see from the bombing this week in Saada, we went to the. I got the screenshot for you. Remember when J.D. Vance were saying the first target, their top missile guy, we had positive idea of him walking into the girlfriend's building and it's now collapsed. So this was on Monday. We went there the next day on Tuesday. I talked to the owner of the building. I said, okay, is there and the Intel guys brought me the owner. I talked to him, translator, and he said, look, it was practically empty. It was a civilian building. There were like 6 people inside. And we were planning to revamp it, to upgrade it. Totally destroyed.
Yeah.
Totally destroyed. A civilian building in a civilian neighborhood, right? And then when we went to Sada in the northwest, which was a psychedelic trip, they didn't tell us that we were going to spend the day and the night over there. So we didn't have everything.
Oh.
I had the clothes on my back. I had no chargers for my phone. I had no toothbrush, nothing. And obviously, there's no internet.
Yeah.
And obviously, I got, okay, a few of us, we got totally crazy because we had commitments. For instance, I had to do 2 podcasts that day. And of course, there were many reasons. And I think the real plausible reason is that they prefer not to have internet and they do everything with old dumb phones.
Mm-hmm.
Sada is the heart of the resistance. It's where Ansarallah was born. And very, very important, the leader, Abdul Malik al-Houthi, he lives in Sada Governorate, as you know. So the whole thing in itself was a tremendous security operation because we left. They said, there's going to be a knock on the door on 3 a.m. Being Yemen was 5, and we left around 5:30. And it was a convoy of white Toyota SUVs, but they didn't drive as a convoy because they knew they would be identified.
Yeah.
So they mixed around on the road. It was very, very clever. So it took them much longer to get there. Instead of 3.5, 4 hours, it took 5.5. And then only when we got there, we knew what was going on. But I was, of course, as your journalistic instincts are working all the time. And I said, maybe they are preparing a face-to-face meeting with Abdul Malik al-Houthi. Obviously, this was our wishful thinking, Larry. We knew that it's absolutely impossible. Nearly as impossible as what happened in Sana when Yahya Saree came to visit us. Can you believe this shit? The guy was in our hotel for at least 40 minutes. So they took an enormous security risk. Himself and the hotel, they were a target for 40 minutes.
Yeah.
Easily, they could have bombed the hotel. Easily. This guy's the number 2 target in Yemen, as you know. Number 1 is Abdul Malik al-Houthi. But it took me a few hours to understand why they took us there on this particular day. That was Wednesday, 26th. Do you know what happened on the 25th, 10 years ago? that was the beginning of the Saudi-led coalition of the willing Arab coalition war against Yemen, backed by the US, leading from behind.
Right.
So we were there at an absolutely crucial time. And obviously, when we went to visit some of the local Ansar Allah people, we visit a cemetery of kids, basically. They had a bus, a school bus bombed by the Saudis years ago. Everybody died. And the evidence of that was found in the cell phone of one of the kids, buried under the rubble, proving that it was a Saudi attack with American bombs, obviously. So, and then we started to put everything into perspective, why they took us there at this particular time. So it was an absolutely crazy trip, of course. And in the next morning, I said, look, I need to go back to Sana because all of us, we have commitments. And Mandela's grandson was with us as well. He was the first to leave because he had commitments as well with South Africa. He needed to talk to people. But the fact of spending the night over the day and the night over there, literally cut off from the world. I loved it. For me, it was like being on a camel caravan in the desert in the 7th century. The same feeling.
Right. Yeah.
And at night, I went to the souk with my armed escort, and then I had a ball because then I could see people, talk to people, hang out with them.
How big of a city was this?
Sada, okay, let's say it's a mid-sized city, very spread out, surrounded by mountains and hills. The mountains are, 20, 25 minutes from, let's say, downtown Sada. 200,000 people, not more than that. 300,000, maybe, And very close to the Saudi border. I saw a highway sign, and they were saying 130 kilometers, which you can do in an hour and a half. So you're very close to Saudi, And the areas of Yemen that were taken over by Saudi years ago or decades ago, all that part of southern Saudi Arabia is actually Yemeni lands. So the people across the border, they're cousins, parents, relatives,
Yeah.
And they keep trading. For instance, you go to a mini mart, most of the products are Saudi. They cross the border. There's practically no border. They cross the border back and forth. And you see some of the stuff that arrived in Hodeida by boat. Can you believe, Larry, that I found canned Thai pineapple?
Really?
That was a wow.
Yeah, you mentioned that the coffee there was out of this world.
The coffee stood down. We were very lucky. They took us to probably the top coffee producer in Yemen. Very sophisticated place with a wonderful restaurant, several bars, and I taste some of their coffees which I am a coffee freak. I grew up in a land which is, But if you compare South American coffee with Yemen, Jesus, that's another level, And I tasted like 4 or 5 different brands, including a light coffee that they have. It's a pale green grain, which I have never seen in my life. And they say, no, this is too light. It tastes absolutely extraordinary, but it's too light for them. And then I tasted the stronger, totally Yemen mocha variations, Wow. I brought something. I brought it with me.
Yeah. Oh, how do they produce it? I mean, are they growing the coffee beans there, or are they bringing
Yes,
them?
They do. In those famous terraces. That these terraces were always the Dutch tried to take over them, the Brits, everybody, the Ottoman Empire, of course, for over for 400 years at least, they had access to these terraces. And you used to drink this coffee in Istanbul. Now, not anymore, of course, because I think they export to African countries. They told me that you can find this coffee, for instance, in Ethiopia, Eritrea, Djibouti, But even in the Arab world, I doubt it. You cannot find this coffee in Qatar, for instance. And here in Southeast Asia, maybe in some parts of Indonesia. And I'm going to try here in Thailand. There's a fantastic Yemeni restaurant here, 10 minutes from my house here. And I'm gonna check if they have these Yemeni brands as well. It's owned by Yemenis. You enter there, you forget about Thailand. You are inside Sana.
So, most Americans, I think most people in Europe don't when they talk about the Houthis.
Yes,
they think they're talking about an ethnic group. They think
yes,
they're
exactly.
talking about. I confess that when I first heard about it, I thought, oh, it must be an ethnic group, but it's really they're followers of this one man.
Yes, the founder of Ansarallah, Hussein. Hussein was the older brother of Abdul Malik al-Houthi. Abdul Malik al-Houthi, if I'm not mistaken, he's probably in his early 50s now.
Mm-hmm.
And for instance, we were at the spectacular, unbelievable 1 million march last Friday.
That was something.
On Al Good Faith. That was something. They played an interview of Hussein al-Houthi from 2002, where he explains what Ansarallah is all about in detail. So, okay, I'll try a concise definition. The Houthis are a clan, a tribe, an extended family, clannish, tribal. But nowadays, when you talk to the guys in the bazaar, for instance, they say, now everybody in Yemen is Houthi.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning the power of Ansarallah, even with Sunnis. These guys are Zaidi Shiites, which is a very particular brand of Shiite Islam, and obviously generates those endless, stupid headlines of Iran-backed Houthis.
Yeah,
you don't even know what they are talking about.
Yeah,
because obviously they offer no context. And this, for instance, we had this serious conversation with several members of they call it the High Political Council. Okay, the easiest explanation, I tried to talk about it in one of my columns. The system is like a triangle,
Mm-hmm.
On top, you have the supreme leader, Abdul Malik al-Houthi. He offers you guidance based on, I would say, pure Quranic principles, but not intolerant like the Wahhabis,
Mm-hmm.
the Sunni Wahhabis in Saudi Arabia or in Qatar or in the Emirates. Then you have a president. You have the 9 members of the High Political Council, which, by the way, and I asked many times until I got a confirmation, they have to answer to Parliament.
They have to answer to who?
To Parliament. They have a Parliament.
Oh, a Parliament. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, they do have a Parliament. And these 9 guys have to go to Parliament, explain what they're thinking, how they are interpreting the spiritual guidance of the leader into political policies. And then there's the connection with the government, with the Yemeni armed forces, the institutions of government, and the judiciary. It's a very complex system, even for Western standards. It's fascinating. It's very complex, and it's quite democratic.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, there is the leader above all, but the leader is not a political leader. He is a spiritual leader. He offers guidance. For instance, every night at 8:30, he has a speech to the nation, broadcast live on national TV. So from the first day, we were gathering at 8:30 in our divania in the hotel, where you relax with the cushions, drinking tea, etc., and listen to. And they got us an English translation. He basically talks about religious matters and spiritual matters. And then I ask, does he talk about politics? I said, yes, sometimes he talks about politics. In certain detail. But because this was Ramadan, he was talking basically about spiritual matters and Quranic matters, quoting the Quran, etc. But the political decisions are taken by this 9-member High Political Council. And we were very lucky, Larry. We talked to 4 of them, which is a lot, including a guy that was brilliant. I talked to him on Friday after the parade on the square, and he's a provincial governor as well. And he said something that ties with something that may have happened this past week, and I'd like to ask you, Larry, about it. The Houthis disabling the E-2 command and control of the USS Harry Truman. That's something that may or may not have happened. The Yemeni armed forces said that it happened. As you know, there's thunderous silence coming from the Pentagon.
Yeah.
So we
Not
really
a
don't
word.
know.
Not a word.
Not a word. So we don't know. We really don't know. For the moment, we only have the Yemeni armed forces version, and including stuff that they posted on X without details, right? And this guy told me on Friday night, yeah, expect a few surprises. So when I first learned about the E2, I said, maybe this is what he was referring to, and they may have other surprises as well. So essentially, they're fearless. And every time we talked to I would say the number one academic in Yemen, the guy who wrote this book in 2 parts, which is a book that basically traces the 10-year war against them since 2015. Professor Bin Haptur. He's a former prime minister. But just to give you an idea, he was a prime minister until a few months ago, when I was trying from my end to get this trip together. I've been talking to them for 1 year to at least from my side and some people that we were part of our group, to get this together. We were a very small group, like 12 people max, And my interlocutors over there, they were always referring to Professor Bin Haptur, which at the time he was the prime minister. So he visited us in Sana'a at the hotel as well. He stayed for over 2 hours, answered all our questions in detail, talking especially about the war for 10 years, and also talking a little bit about the system of government. So, and then he explained how they have to report to parliament to explain and discuss their political decisions, So in the end, it's a very democratic thing.
I think the confusion a lot in the West, excuse me, they believe, many are inclined to believe that the Yemenis, the Houthis in particular, are tied into groups like Al-Qaeda. And yet,
it's the absolute opposite.
Yeah, without understanding. Yeah. So go ahead and explain why people are wrong on that.
Well, it's very convenient to lump the Houthis with Al-Qaeda or ISIS, because then you qualify them as terrorists.
Right.
And now officially, the White House and the Pentagon consider the Houthis as a terrorist organization, correct, which in terms of stupidity beats anything apart from saying that Jolani is a moderate head shopper turned Democrat in Syria. It's on the same level.
Right.
Who are Al-Qaeda in the Arabic Peninsula, ACAP, and ISIS-Daesh? They are proxies depending on the agenda, or a particular agenda in which part of the Arabic Peninsula, of the Saudis, the Emiratis, and factions in Washington. Right. This is the short, concise definition of what Al-Qaeda in the Arabic Peninsula and ISIS-Daesh do in Yemen. Obviously, they are radically opposed to the Houthis, but they don't have enough firepower to confront the Houthis in the Houthi areas, which is Sana'a, parts of the west, all the way to Hodeidah, the port of Hodeidah in the Red Sea, and going north all the way to Sada and very close to the Saudi border. This is most of Yemen, apart from the deserts in the east, the Hadramaut, which, as far as I could tell, is total mess. Nobody knows who's running the Hadramaut except the local tribal chiefs and clans, which may or may not sympathize with the Houthis, depending on which part of the Hadramaut you are, but certainly hate the Emiratis and the Saudis to death. So it is an extremely complicated thing, because as far as I could understand, and I still need to ask some questions, there are more or less 3 Yemens at the moment. This Yemen controlled by the Houthis, which is most of Yemen in the western part of Yemen, with population-wise is also complicated. For instance, some people told me that Yemen now is 40 million people. I think it's much less. And of these 40 million, 30 million are Houthis or support the Houthis. So I could not confront this with reality. I didn't have time to do it. Others said that Yemen is a little over 20 million. And let's say 60 or 70% support the Houthis. Support for the Houthis, I could see is more or less spread out. But there is a puppet government in Aden, in the port, in the south. So this is the so-called, I don't, there is a name for it that I forgot now. It's not salvation thing, no. It's something that is recognized by the UN, but the UN, as you know, is a joke. The guy who's running this thing sits in a five-star hotel in Riyadh. He's not in Aden. And we talked to people from Aden, including Professor Bin Haptour. He was at Aden University until a few years ago. And he said people over there are extremely unhappy. They are governed by this puppet thing, which they don't know what it is. They are very unhappy. A lot of people left. The best and the brightest and the merchants all left. They came here. Here is Sana'a, the capital. And then the third, Yemen, is the eastern part of Yemen, including this enormous Hadramaut desert area. By the way, home of the Bin Laden clan, as you know, Larry. The Bin Laden clan.
Yes, actually, I didn't know that.
Yes, and Osama bin Laden basically is a Yemeni tribal guy from the deserts of Hadramaut. And also very important, most of the navigators that ended up in Southeast Asia, you saw how they introduced Islam to Java, a little bit everywhere. I traveled Java from east to west, and you could have Yemeni influences almost everywhere. They came from the Hadramaut. Malaysia, same thing. We had a fantastic Malaysian scholar in our group. The guy was brilliant, Larry. Can you believe that he made a presentation to a group of Yemeni scholars in one of the days of our conference? The guy made a presentation about the militarization of archaeology in Al-Quds. Wow! Even the Yemenis were like, oof, how Israel is trying to erase the historical memory of Al-Quds by militarizing excavations and archaeology as a whole, leading to what our friend Alistair has been stressing. Probably the only one in the West who understands what that means. The famous day when they are going to try to devastate Al-Quds itself.
Well, did you get
to raise the bloody third temple in their warped minds, right?
Yeah, there's all this eschatology.
Completely scatological, psychopathological, messianic Old Testament crap, which they believe in.
Yeah. They use that as a justification. Did you get a set? What insights or understanding did you get of the original? You got the split within Islam between the Sunnis and the Shia. I'll simplify it. With the Sunnis, and we're the original ones, and the Shia are these apostates. How did the Shia come to emerge in Yemen? Because, as you say, they go back to the days of the Prophet.
Yes, and obviously because I would say the principles of Zayd Shiism, it's a sort of brotherly love, if I could use a Flower Power 60s metaphor. Yeah, sort of. So it's easy for all of you, our audience, to understand. They are not vengeful. They are not warlike at all. But there are some very strict principles, and that includes the defense of brotherly peoples, like they refer to the Palestinians.
Right.
Their principled position, which they stress over and over again, and this is absolutely incomprehensible in the West, is that their position of attacking Israeli ships or Israeli ships that are going or helping what they call the entity in Israel, which is absolutely correct, is a principle, I would say, pure 7th century expressed by Muhammad position, And this is absolutely incredible, in fact, because they take it to the ultimate consequences, even paying a personal price for it. Now that they have now it's not only a coalition of stupid Saudis and Emiratis. Now it's the Pentagon and CENTCOM all out against them. This is and we were worried, all of us. We were saying, do you know who you're up against? And they are, like an immovable force. We will win.
Well, it's striking how effective they've been with let's call it their anti-aircraft defense in terms of bringing down 16 predator. They claim
16 MK9 exactly.
The Predator drones, right?
Yes.
How do they have that expertise? Where did that come from?
Well, this is a military secret, Larry. Of course, that for instance, I asked point blank, what's the level of military cooperation with Iran? I did not get a straight answer. Did get, yes, they helped us a lot, but lately we have been developed everything in our military arsenal by ourselves. There are some, I would say there is a background for it that it's, I learned over there, and then doing the math, it makes total sense. For instance, one of our interlocutors said that the best engineers and physicists in Yemen, traditionally, guess where they studied? USSR and China.
Okay.
That's number one. Number two, I think Professor Binghaptur, he said that we had an excellent military relationship with Egypt before Sadat, meaning Nasser times, right? 60s, especially the 60s. So obviously, and very important, they have very good universities, Larry. Sana University and Sada universities are top-level universities, really. I was impressed by what I saw. We talked, for instance, with the rector of Sana University. So there is a background that comes from, decades, since the Cold War, since the 60s, right, etc. Obviously, in terms of Russia, of course, the Russians, it's a very, very tricky matter. They cannot admit openly that they have channels of communication with Ansarallah in Yemen. This is very tricky. I had to navigate this writing one of my columns to give an idea to all of you. And the Chinese, they openly, for instance, Among Us was an absolutely great guy. I became friendly with him. He's an amazing man. He's a Hui, Chinese Muslim, from Ningxia province, speaks almost perfect Arabic. He runs Middle East Study Center in Huanzhou, which is a high-tech mecca in China. And I asked him a lot of questions, and he explained a lot of stuff. For instance, in the first day, they took us to a Chinese obelisk in the hills outside of Sana. Why? Why there's a Chinese obelisk here? And Professor Ma explained, of course, because during Maoist times, China was sending workers to help Yemen to build infrastructure.
Oh, okay.
Makes total sense. So this is the international proletariat in action, stuff that we read in college that we saw. No, this is a fiction. No, this is a factual example. And many of them died while in several construction works in Yemen. And you have a small cemetery around the obelisk in the hills of Sana of Chinese workers. Mind-boggling stuff. Yeah. So all that explains gives you the background of very close collaboration in several levels between different Yemeni governments and the Chinese. And today, of course, that continues. But of course, they will never spell out the details, especially for us foreigners. But for instance, the famous question that I asked a member of the High Political Council, point blank, do you have privileged channels of communication with both Russia and China? His response was a masterpiece, obviously lost in translation. I picked up a few words, but not enough to make it at all understood, and it was lost in translation. But basically, in a very flowery, metaphorical Arabic way, even poetic, he said, yes. Yeah. Fabulous. Which explains, of course, why Chinese ships and Russian ships in the Red Sea, of course, they are not attacked because the Yemenis know exactly who they are. They are in communication. They are not going to Israel or delivering anything to Israel. So they have free passage in the Bab al-Mandeb and the Red Sea.
Well, and that the sophistication of being able to identify ships and their locations.
Yes. And the locations
is, they've got to be getting some support from someone on the ISR side, because I don't think that they don't have a space program. They don't have satellites.
is that they don't have satellites. You're right. So,
but they have shown an amazing degree of sophistication on that front.
You're right, Larry, and that's where the Russians and the Chinese fit in, right?
Mm-hmm.
So of course, from Russia, it's an extremely complex position. For instance, when I was in Moscow last summer, there were two different Yemeni delegations visiting Moscow. One of them was this delegation linked to the Houthis, and I talked to them. We had a long meeting in Moscow. That was in June last year. And then there was a so-called official Aden government delegation also talking to the Russians. And it was very hard. I tried some people in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Look, they want to have a meeting with the Ministry of Agriculture here in Moscow because they need grain. They are under a blockade, as you know. And it was very hard to set this thing up, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
So the Russians officially and bureaucratically, that's a little bit heritage of the Soviet Union. They have a certain problem of dealing with both sides. Although, obviously, there are privileged channels with Ansarallah. There's no question about that. We don't know the extent, and we don't know the details, of course. But the Chinese know it's in the open. And Professor Ma told me that Yahya Saree in China, he's a superstar, Larry. Everybody knows who he is, and he is supported by a young generation of Chinese. They identify the struggle for Palestine against the genocide directly with Yahya Saree, his daily briefings, and the Yemeni position. So, it's amazing. In terms of soft power, they have the whole of China behind them.
No, I think...
Yeah.
But
yes.
I was just going to say that I think most of the U.S. experience with Yemen centers around the bombing of the USS Cole off of the coast of Aden,
right,
back in 2000. And
2000, right? Yeah.
We sent. There was a joint State Department FBI team that went, and one of my friends was on that trip, and he said he was appalled by the FBI's behavior because they rolled in, they brought in several cases of beer with them on their airplanes, and so they were drinking it up in the hotel. Some of the female FBI agents were wearing these tight golf shirts, so they were not dressed in an appropriate manner for women in Yemeni society. And then that was followed by one of she was a nemesis of mine for a bit anyway at State Department. Barbara Bodine was the
I remember by name Barbara Bodine. She was a friend of yours?
She tried to get me fired from State Department. That's a long story, but she was ambassador there, and she was captured, taken hostage for like a day or two, and then it's like that the scene from a cartoon where a whale will ingest something that's very unpalatable and nasty and then spits it out. That's what happened with her. They took her hostage and go, "Oh my God, we got to give her back.
Gotta get rid of this."
But that's apart from that. It was then Yemen was seen as part. I think perceived as being part of bin Laden's network, which religiously they're opposed
to the fact that he was a Yemeni, essentially.
Yeah. Which again, you have to step back and say, when we're looking at the Houthis, we're looking at a Shia movement, and when you're looking at Al Qaeda, you're looking at a radical Sunni movement, albeit with sometime with Western support. But they're theologically at odds.
Exactly. But considering the overall insensitivity, like the examples that you just mentioned, it doesn't surprise me. They simply cannot understand. And especially in Yemen is very, very complex.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have Zaidi Shiism and you have influence of Wahhabism from those upstarts in the north, which essentially they want to annex Yemen. They have been, according to Professor Bin Haptur, he said that the Saudis have been trying to gobble Yemen and destroy us since 1967, non-stop. And it's true. Always supported by the US, of course. glorified vassals. And now all the masks are off because now it's the empire itself, which basically what Trump said, which in terms of stupidity, forgive me, that the Houthis are barbarians and they will be annihilated. This one is for the history books,
Yeah.
He will regret it. And he will regret it in his lifetime. They don't even try to understand the intricacies of or what they are stepping into and the history of these people, and especially the history of Yemen as a nation of fighters from the beginning.
Right.
The guys who were the core of the Islamic armies when Islam started to spread around, in the Arabic Peninsula, then in Eastern Africa, then in the Maghreb, and then across the Indian Ocean to India and Southeast Asia. They don't know the basic history facts. Once again, it's absolutely the Brits. At least they know the basics. When they were an empire, at least they did their homework before, and then obviously they honed their divide and rule strategies. The Americans even bother to study,
Yeah, I can't say offhand when we closed our embassy there. When
I saw the embassy. We drove by, Larry. Yeah, yeah. Now it's totally it's shut down for quite a long time. Me too. I don't remember when, but that was a long time ago.
Yeah, because an old friend of mine who's now deceased. Patrick Lang, Walter Patrick Lang. He was the defense attaché in Yemen.
Okay.
And he told stories of going hunting with Saleh.
What time was that, Larry? Remember?
Boy, it had to be the 1980s.
In the 1980s, right? Yeah, right.
Because he was Pat set up actually the Arabic program at West Point. So he was a leading. He was probably one of the best speakers of Arabic in the United States military. And
very few.
So he served both in Yemen and in Saudi Arabia as a defense attaché. So he had that experience. But and that's part of what's going on here in the United States. We don't have anybody that knows Yemen.
Nobody, obviously. No. Oh, well, look, I read the Signal fiasco.
Huh.
It's pathetic. It's worse than the Three Stooges because there were the Three Stooges plus other Stooges in the conversation. Yeah. Nobody knows it. This idiot Hexas said nobody knows who his quote. The whole world, his quote, the whole world doesn't know who the Houthis are. Congratulations.
Yeah.
The whole world knows who the Houthis are because they see Yahya Saree every day on their smartphones.
Yeah.
But the head of the Pentagon doesn't know shit about Yemen. It's absolutely unbelievable. Or believable.
Well, did you get any sense of how many civilians have been killed because of the U.S. bombings in the last 2 weeks?
Very good question. I think it has not reached the low hundreds. Yes. Let's say dozens. Each hit is usually 3, 4, 5, because first of all, they don't have any ground intel. Mm-hmm. So when they bomb installations, they assume these are military installations. These are usually vacant, or they are civilian buildings that are vacant. What we saw in Saada was much more worrying. And I talk about this with Judge Knapp. And I think it's important to talk to you about this again. The day we arrived in Saada, they took us to a in-progress cancer hospital, which they told us was immensely hard to get the funds. They had collections, all over the governorate to build a state-of-the-art cancer hospital for the whole of Northwest Yemen. The Americans bombed it. Cancer hospital is still being built. There you go, Larry. That's the fragment of an American bomb.
Yeah.
This one, I put it on my backpack and I actually went through 3 airports with it. But much better. We found other fragments. We spent a few hours over there digging a little bit because the bombing was on Monday and we were there on Wednesday. We found fragments with manufacturer name and contract number. So the Yemenis are going to go after it and show to everybody, look, American bombs, This is where they come from. And the evidence is here that they bombed a cancer hospital. And this time there are foreigners who are witnesses. A few of us, 7 or 8 of us were witnesses. We went there, we saw the whole thing, and we collected some stuff. And everything that we collected, we left for them, obviously, for the Yemeni investigating teams.
Do you think that the reason they had you guys there is signals that they're undergoing a change in their, let's call it, the public relations campaign? They realize that they've not been effective on the public diplomacy front?
No, on the contrary, Larry. It took them months to put this operation together. To give an idea, we were officially invited by the Ministry of Foreign Relations of Yemen. We visited the Ministry of Foreign Relations. We talked to the minister, by the way, an ex-journalist, super nice guy. And there was a sort of state organized operation to take care of us and provide our security. We had a convoy of black SUVs all the time, snipers on the roof around the conference that they organized. The main event, let's put it this way, was a conference on Palestine called You Are Not Alone. So, there were like 1,000 people in a hall for almost 4 days. And we were the foreign guests. And many that were invited couldn't come for several reasons. Some because they were afraid. Some because they were afraid they would be arrested coming back to their country, especially Americans. For instance, my friend Chris was detained back in the Canada-US border yesterday.
Oh, really?
And they confiscated his iPhone, among other things, which hopefully Chris will get it back. Jackson Hinkle, nothing happened to him because he flew back to Moscow. But they were the only 2 Americans. And other Americans were invited. They said, look, it's too risky for us to come because we don't know what's going to happen to us when we go back to the US. Absolutely correct. Professor Marandi, our very good friend,
right,
he didn't come because he was afraid that he would be blocked in Amman because he was traveling with an Iranian passport. And obviously going through customs, even if he was in transit in Amman, you have to show your passport to get a boarding card to board a Yemeni Airways flights to Sana'a. It's a relatively complicated process.
Well, I was going to ask, how do you actually physically get there? What's the...
Oh, yes, Larry. I think for all of you, our audience, this is, okay. The only airport on the planet where you can catch a flight to Sana'a is Amman Airport in Jordan. Why? Because Yemeni Airways flies from Sana'a and also from Aden to Jordan, to Amman. They probably have, I would say, a relatively decent deal with the little king. Okay, to his credit, he must be an idiot, but to his credit, it's the only place from where you can, I would say, break the blockade, the total blockade against Yemen. So, in my case, for instance, I flew from the Persian Gulf. I arrived at the transfer desk in Amman, and I showed them the visa. They gave us an electronic visa. So I showed them the visa, said, can I have my boarding card? It's more complicated. They check your visa. They check that you're flying Yemeni Airways. They said, please come back 1 hour later, and then we'll have your boarding card. So you go to the lounging area in the airport. You come back. You have to go through security again, back and forth. And then they give you your boarding card like 40 minutes before boarding. That's the only way to get there, Larry. There's no other way anywhere on the planet. So it is complicated. If you don't have the visa, which is very hard, once again, it's very hard to get. This visa came directly from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Sana'a to each of us in electronic form, so we could prove, even when we started our flight, for instance, when I started here in Thailand, our final destination. But you still don't have a boarding card until the last minute. And the plane that we took, Larry, from Sana'a to Amman on the way back was a new Airbus. Fascinating. How did they get this? A miracle. Yeah. A new Airbus with wonderful business class cabins. Wow. So I have no idea how they got it, but they do. But for instance, I put it on my Telegram channel. The airport, by the way, was bombed by the Americans again this past few days. It was bombed 2 weeks ago. It was bombed while we were there again, and they will keep on bombing it. But there's nothing to bomb.
I was saying, what targets are they
There's
hitting?
nothing to bomb. They are, fucked up helicopters. I took a pic of one jet that maybe was bombed by mistake because it looked like a civilian jet. There's nothing to bomb, but they keep bombing it.
Yeah.
One second, no ground intel because they don't know. First of all, they don't know where the top guys in the Ansarallah structure, where they are. And they're very discreet. And that's why I was particularly horrified when Yahya Saree showed up. I said, "Oh my God, this guy's going to be here for now. The whole neighborhood is a target.
Yeah.
If the
Yeah.
if CENTCOM wanted it, the missile, the underground missile complexes, not confirmed, of course. The Americans are saying that they bombed, but they couldn't. The bombs couldn't penetrate. Just destroy the entrances. Obviously, the Ansarallah didn't say a word about it. We only have the word of I think it was the Wall Street Journal who published that. I wonder where they got this information and if it's true or not. We don't. We also don't know. There's no confirmation, no evidence, nothing. So they obviously they move between Sana and Sada, and when they do, it's very discreet, like in the case of our non-convoy, right?
Right.
And they have their other channels. And in Sada, wow, in Sada, you have certainly underground facilities in the mountains. Sada is surrounded by mountains, and it's not only hills around Sana. These are real mountains. It reminds me a lot of Afghanistan. In fact, okay, not so high like in the Kush, but it reminded me of Afghanistan. You cannot find anybody over there. Forget it.
Yeah.
And without ground, don't forget it. No way. So they bomb civilian installations, Larry. The usual procedure.
What about the food?
Oh my God. Shit. One night we had seafood from Hodeida. Some of the best crab that I ate in my life, for instance, and lobster, all brought from Hodeida. So the trucks can go back and forth from Sana to Hodeida, at least if you're transporting seafood. And I found my dish, which I went to get the recipe to try to cook it myself. It's a sort of a version of a sort of beef bourguignon in France, but spicy, slightly spicy, not too much. It's to die for. It's called salta. So I'm gonna try to find a salta recipe on YouTube to see if I can cook salta at home.
Or maybe go to that Yemeni restaurant near you and see if you can.
Exactly, and I'll go to this week. I'll go to the Yemeni restaurant, hear my neighbors, and say, "Do you have salta?" The food is outstanding, really, very, very good. And there's a lot of Indian influence as well. For instance, the tastiest samosas I ate outside of India.
Really?
Every day. Amazing, really amazing. And of course, they have banquets. They threw banquets where the amount of food we were looking at it. I can't believe this. This is food for 1,000 people. And the table was like, what, 25, 30? Unbelievable. The natural generosity that you instantly recognize,
Sure.
It's very, very touching. As you know, this is the cliche applies. It is the poorest nation in the Arabic Peninsula. But for them, it doesn't matter. For instance, if you go to the souk at night, everybody's chewing cat. They have these bowls of cat here, but they eat well. They are super cool, small restaurants, very, very cheap, where you can have a meal for $1. Around the souk, you have mini hotels, like locandas in Italy, where you can have a bed for the whole day for $5. So a lot of people live in these hotels back and forth. Amazing.
What are they doing for currency?
I have it. I don't know where I put it, but I brought a lot of Yemeni.
So you had to exchange dollars, or
you bet. One Yemeni. Okay, $1 is 530 Yemeni riyals.
Okay.
To give you an idea, I changed $100 because I went to the souk. I wanted to buy a lot of stuff. I bought a lot of stuff, and I still have 18,000 riyals, which is like $20. So I bought $80 on lots of stuff, food, this absolutely outstanding turban, beautiful stuff, So the price and crazy. I found exchange offices. They have Western Union and MoneyGram, Larry.
Really?
Unbelievable.
Okay.
So you can, if you have, I'm sure they have a lot of people that they know in Ethiopia, Eritrea, Eastern Africa, etc. You can send a Western Union and Telegram back and forth. As long as you don't send it to the West, no problem. And also they have Islamic banking. You pick up the phone here. Look, a guy showed up here, $100. And then the guy on the other side said, okay, I'll have the $100 when somebody shows up to collect. Islamic banking, which everybody does it,
Mm-hmm.
So you see money circulating.
Yeah.
Fascinating stuff.
Did you have a chance to talk to anybody about Yemen being used as a stepping stone to go to war with Iran?
Absolutely. But there's no question about that. And they know it. And the Iranians know it as well. This doesn't mean that Iran-backed Houthis are getting everything they want. The IRGC. It has nothing to do with it. But both the leadership of Ansar Allah in Sana'a and Sada and the IRGC, they know exactly what's going on. And obviously, we don't know if they have a concerted strategy, which, by the way, would hark back to what General Soleimani, the big picture of General Soleimani for the axis of resistance.
Right.
For instance, you see, you don't see Hezbollah influence, in your face anywhere. You see portraits of Nasrallah everywhere, in the streets, in the middle of the highway, in the middle of nowhere going to Sada, have portraits of Nasrallah. But we don't know how close the axis of resistance is coordinating, especially now. When Syria disappeared from the equation, Hezbollah is restructuring, although the new cadres are at very, very high level. This is something we could see in Lebanon last month when I was there for the Nasrallah funeral. IRGC and Iran, of course, they are totally focused on the threat of war against Iran. So obviously they are not talking on the phone with Ansar Allah every day. So we don't know how integrated they are. What we know is that the psychopathologicals in Tel Aviv, they want to go after everybody.
Yeah.
And obviously with the Americans doing the hard work, as you know very well.
Well, and what's remarkable is how effective the Houthis have been in shutting down maritime traffic and standing off with the U.S. Navy. I mean, this is
US Navy. Yes. They own the Bab al-Mandab and they own most of the Red Sea. It's a fact.
Yeah.
It's a fact. And that explains a part of the Sigma fiasco. You remember that they were talking about doing favors to Europe.
Mm-hmm.
You know why, right, Larry? 4 of the 5 big shipping companies transiting in the Red Sea are Europeans.
Yeah.
And the 5th is Costco, Chinese. So yes, they would be doing a favor to Europe if they could freedom navigation in the Red Sea. But obviously, to get that, you have to cancel the genocide, which will never happen. And that's how you get what is happening now. But it's impossible to diplomatically explain this to Team Trump 2.0.
Yeah, no,
there's no even understand what you're talking about, right?
Nor do they appear to want to understand. That's
and they don't want to. You're right, and they don't want to understand. Of course.
So
any of you, I can imagine you, Ray, in 5 minutes explaining to these idiots what's going on over there. Of course, they wouldn't listen to you guys. No.
Well, that's why what you have to say is so important. I mean, the broadcast you did with the judge, and then doing this, because if we just educate people about really what's going on, and that
in reality, not in fiction, right, Larry?
The Houthis aren't some alien invaders from some other planet.
Mars attacks.
Yeah.
No, they're not. They're real people They have principles. They have moral clarity, which is something that disappeared from the West, and they know what they're doing. And they know the stakes. The stakes couldn't be higher for them. They could be obliterated in a matter of weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm very, very worried about what the Pentagon wants to do in Yemen. Very worried.
Well,
because the example of, for instance, Alistair already pointed out, everybody fell in love with the idea of decapitating Hezbollah's leadership. So they think they can do this to Ansarallah, and they think that they can do this with Iran as well.
Yeah.
They're stupid enough to believe in it.
Yeah.
It's absolutely crazy. Exactly.
Yeah.
So it is for the leadership of Ansarallah. Wow, the stakes are up there.
I think what it will take is for the Houthis, if they sink an aircraft carrier, that is going to
Yes.
That will change the game, and not
That would change the game. You're right.
because all of a sudden the United States, it's going to set off a political storm in the United States.
Of course.
You know,
Of course.
how could it'll put Trump so much on the defensive that while he'd be inclined to lash out, what they're running into is the problem. There is a limit to their military resources. They don't have unlimited air defense missiles on those ships. Number one. And so if the Houthis step up their attacks on them, they can quickly exhaust their ability to defend themselves.
I think you did a breakdown of the Palestine 2 missile, right, Larry?
Yeah.
They could hit the USS with a punch, no?
Yeah, and to do that, they're going to need some intel.
Exactly. Yeah.
It was so.
And where will that come from?
Yeah. Well, gee, would anybody have any incentive to pass that along? That's key.
Exactly. Absolutely.
All right, my brother. Listen, I've taken up enough of your time.
The craziest thing is that this might happen, right?
Yeah. Well,
Palestine doing serious damage to the USS Truman.
Yeah. No, if they, and they frankly will be fully justified in doing it, given the attacks and that what came out of Signalgate, and people have been so obsessed with the process. How did Goldberg get on? Ignoring the substance of what was said, and even I had a little back and forth with Judge Napolitano on this. Doesn't matter whether this is an abuse of intelligence. What matters is they had no reason. Yemen had done nothing since the ceasefire to warrant an attack like this. This is unprovoked. This is in contradiction of Article 51. Yemen didn't do anything, and we decided to bomb them. That is it's an act of war on our part.
Absolutely. Exactly.
In the United States.
So they have to respond. Exactly.
So
last question, Larry. What about, let's say, the trend of public opinion in the US, even if they don't know anything about the Houthis, as Hex said, do they feel that this is something profoundly absurd? No.
In fact, I think it's just the opposite. It's again the cartoon version of what Yemen is prevails. That these seething radical Muslims that hate us for our freedom, that kind of thing.
For our freedom, right.
And therefore, we got to stop them. They're terrorists, they're barbarians, they're pirates. And because, again, America, we don't pay any price. But when we blow up and kill these civilians, it's no sweat off our back.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why we do it so frequently. It's only going to be when we start paying a price for it, and there are, grieving Americans, then all of a sudden we'll maybe care and say, okay, let's think this through. But we're not there yet.
No, we're not there yet.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Hey, you look rejuvenated as a result of our conversation, but you need to go.
Thank you, Larry. Yes, thanks to you. Absolutely, yes. And I needed to relax a little bit. I was stressed since Saturday. Absolutely. Yeah.
I can. Well, you've done good work. So thank you for taking the time. And as always,
thank you, Larry. It was a real pleasure. Absolutely.
We'll do it again.
Absolutely. Yes, definitely. And these podcasts are very, very important. And all of you guys talking about Yemen, it's very, very important.
Yeah,
At least fraction of the American population are going to start thinking,
Yeah, we'll get it out there.
Very good.
All right, thanks. Pepe is truly a great journalist and a brave one at that. I thank you for watching this episode of CounterCurrents. Please hit the like and subscribe button, and we'll see you soon. Thanks for watching.